continues in peace. If it gets to an open, reformist, democratic society, we'll be the first to cheer, because a genuine democracy is a friend of peace. A genuine democracy with all the institutions and the checks and balances of democracy and a free press.
How fearful are you?
That's peace.
How fearful are you about the Muslim Brotherhood? There are two schools of thought. One is that they are not contaminated with too much fundamentalism. Others think they may well be.
That's what people said about Hamas. That's what people said about Hezbollah. That's what people said about Khomeini. I remember, you know, I gave you the example of the Cedar Revolution, the secular, liberal, open, pro-Western Cedar Revolution in Lebanon. There was a revolution in Iran in 1979, and it began with Shapur Bakhtiar. You remember him? Mm-hmm. He was a Western-oriented, open governance and so on, and he was disposed after 3 months. So the question is, what do you get? Do you get 1979 in Iran, or do you get 1989 in Western Europe, Eastern Europe? In Eastern Europe, they turned towards democracy. In Iran, they turned towards a backward theocracy. And I have not seen a single case in which the Muslim Brotherhood, of its various shades and hues, turns toward the European liberal model. They invariably turn to more closer or identical to the Iranian model.
I'm going to take a short break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about Libya, Gaddafi, and the peace process.
Release the most of my.
He's looking for those protests, hurting pictures. Back with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's turn to Libya, where it's a pretty disconcerting picture is now emerging, where Gaddafi appeared to be on his way out, but has now fought his way back and appears to be winning the battle against the protesters. No one's intervened on the behalf of those protesters. What do you make of what's happening there?
Well, Gaddafi is no friend of Israel, is no friend of the Jewish people. And I think, as people can see now, he's no friend of the Libyan people. And this is a man who helped explode civilian airlines in the skies. He's fostered terrorism. He's done a lot of terrible things. So I don't think anybody would be sorry to see him go. I wouldn't.
What if he doesn't go?
I think the case of Libya is an interesting place where values and interests cohere. You know, as a leader, you often have a situation where you want to advance a set of values, free democratic societies, and at the same time you may have overriding interests that force you to think otherwise. I don't see that conflict in the case of Libya. I think he could be done away with, and I think everybody would benefit.
I mean, everyone seems to be in agreement that he's got to go. My point is that he's not going, and he's made it clear he won't go, and he appears to be winning his battle by mercilessly killing any protesters. We are seeing something that's bordering on genocide here. Is there not a moral compunction for America, for the West generally, to get in there and sort this out?
I think it's one of those cases where the moral compunction, as you said, and the interests cohere. I don't think it's a problem, so I wouldn't rule out very firm action against Libya. I think that's something that should be considered seriously.
If America,
I'm sure it is being considered.
If America decided to take military action, would you support that?
Certainly wouldn't be against it.
Moving to Saudi Arabia, some fascinating developments in Bahrain, where it would appear that Saudi forces have been in there. And that's a pretty surprising development, isn't it? What do you make of that?
I don't think it's surprising at all. I mean, I think they're concerned with a possible Iranian takeover of Bahrain, which would put Iran effectively within spitting distance of the Arabian Peninsula. Now, Saudi Arabia is working to protect its own interests, but there is a very large global interest in making sure that the world's oil wells, that the largest reserves of the world's oil supply, do not fall into Iranian or pro-Iranian hands.
You refer regularly to Iran. Everybody knows your view about Iran, that they believe in the extermination of all things Israel.
It's not only that they believe it. Look at what they're doing now.
But what I was going to flip it on his head and say, what are you doing about that? given that you know that is their position? I mean, rather than wait for other countries to intervene on your behalf, what is Israel actually doing right now to combat this incredibly serious threat?
Well, the first thing I've been trying to do for a long time, for about 15 years, I was elected first time 15 years ago, and I went to speak before the joint session of the U.S. Congress. And I said that the single greatest threat facing the world and my own country was the arming of Iran with nuclear weapons. And since then, what I've been trying to do is to alert the world and the leaders of the world that it's not merely our problem, that it's their problem. Because Iran today is in Afghanistan, it's in Iraq, it's gotten control of Lebanon, it's gotten control of half the Palestinian society.
Does it have nuclear weapons, do you think?
It's working to get them. It's in
How
the
close
Hornet.
do you think they are?
I think they're getting a lot closer.
Should they be transparent about their nuclear program?
Even to the extent that they are transparent, it's very clear what they're doing. They've enriched enough material now almost for 3 nuclear bombs. They still have to re-enrich it again, but that's what they're doing. They're building long-range CBMs, not only to reach us. ICBMs, they don't need that.
What do you do about this country, which is apparently arming itself to the teeth, possibly getting nuclear weapons, and you're its #1 target? What are you doing about it?
Well, one of the things that we're telling people is that sanctions by themselves are not going to be enough. That the only thing that will work is if Iran knew that if sanctions fail, there'll be a credible military option. Now, this is not just our problem. This is the problem of Europe, of the United States.
Are you talking United Nations?
I'm talking about a credible military action that
Led by who?
Led preferably by the United States. It's not that complicated. It could be done. It's not easy, but it's not impossible.
What is credible military action against Iran? What does that constitute?
It means action that will knock out their nuclear facilities, and it's
Are you talking
eminently
airstrikes,
possible.
or could you contemplate some kind of land invasion?
Well, I think the United States has proven great effectiveness, and I'm going to divulge a secret to you about their capabilities. They're actually greater than ours. You know, I mean, the American Air Force and the American Army is bigger than,
If for whatever
than the Israeli
reason,
Army, and they're
but if for whatever reason the Americans choose not to do this, the threat still remains,
Yes.
and you're still the #1 target. Would you act unilaterally, militarily?
No, we always reserve the right to defend ourselves. That's been one of the tragedies of Jewish history, that the Jewish people were thrust into a state of defenselessness. We were attacked again and again and again with viciousness, and never had the capacity to defend ourselves.
Does Israel
we do now have that capacity.
Do you have nuclear weapons?
Well, we have a long-standing policy that we won't be the first to introduce nuclear weapons into the Middle East, and that hasn't changed.
So you don't have any?
That's our policy, not to be the first to introduce nuclear weapons into the Middle East.
But if you take an assumption that other countries may have them, then that may mean you have them.
Well, it may mean that we don't pose a threat to anyone. We don't call for anyone's annihilation. We don't foster terrorism. We don't threaten to obliterate countries with nuclear weapons. But we are threatened with all these threats. We have not fired thousands of rockets into our neighbors.
Is it right to expect countries like Iran to be transparent about their own nuclear programs if you're not transparent yourself?
Well, Iran is a signatory to the NPT. I mean, this is the absurd thing. Everybody says take the non-proliferation treaty and expand it and bring Israel into it. No, the problem in the Middle East is not that other countries don't join it. It's that those countries who joined the non-proliferation treaty have violated left and right, beginning with Iraq under Saddam Hussein, going on to Libya, Syria recently. They're all signatories to the NPT. They all developed nuclear weapons programs. Syria just did that and was exposed. And Iran is doing it every day. So
do you think it's a bit of a sham?
I think it's ridiculous. I think the problem in the Middle East is, one, that the signatories of the NPT violated, and secondly, that they're focusing their attention on Israel when the problem in the Middle East is this tyrannical medieval regime, a terrorist regime of Iran, in which the mullahs and the ayatollahs want nuclear weapons with which they openly threaten to wipe out, to make another Holocaust, to wipe out the Jewish state. But that's just for starters. They say that we're the small Satan, that the United States is the great Satan. And I suppose Europe, I don't want you to be offended, you're the sort of a middle-sized Satan. All of these have to be dominated, obliterated, terrorized, and they're actually true to their word.